So I have a last question for you, and it's an important one. How can security teams best get executive leadership on board to support these types of changes?
Yeah, if the executive leaders are not on board, that's where your budgets come in, that's where your funding comes in, that's where your resources and priorities come in. And I think it's really important to communicate. And the mistake we always make, and trust me, no one's made more mistakes than I have, but to communicate not in terms of technical jargon, but in terms of risk to the business. So, for example, an organization that is not compliant with a certain standard, it could be a seven-figure risk. If an organization experiences a ransomware attack, that could be a 7 to 8 figure risk to the business. I think the first thing we've got to do a better job of is to communicate cyber risk in a language that translates to business risk, business disruption, business destruction, and what does that mean? And so that it's easier for executives to understand that, and to make a determination that we really need to beef up our capabilities and provide more resources, provide more budgets to acquire some technologies like these AI-based cyber security controls, implement those in our computing ecosystem. And then also, I think another thing for business executives for us to communicate better and for them to understand is to achieve certification with some credible standards. So HITRUST certification, CMMC certification, or whatever else may be relevant to your business or your industry, I think establishes credibility. And as we look to the future, I think it's very important for businesses and organizations to have an evidence-based program, that's tied into some type of a certifiable cybersecurity framework. And I think those organizations that really look at those two pillars very closely, a certifiable framework and an evidence-based capability that they've implemented, communicating that to senior executives, because that process of achieving certification typically takes 12 to 24 months. It's not something you achieve overnight. And a business has to be committed to it, and it starts with senior leadership. So being able to communicate that in a language they understand, I think is important. Articulating it, that cyber risk is business risk. It's a 7-8 figure risk to businesses as we look to the future. But we can be successful and mitigate that if we have the appropriate cyber capabilities implemented. And I want to end my response to that question with two words. And these two words are really important for all of us as we think about communications with senior leadership and the board of directors. And those two words are cyber resilience. And I think the key thing is that there is no business that will be 100% secure. We are always surrounded by risk. What is important is that, do we have the appropriate level of cyber resilience inside our business to mitigate or reduce the threats and the risks to the business, so that business processes are not going to be impacted, so that even if there's a ransomware attack, we are prepared to deal with it. And we know that within 24 hours or 48 hours or 72 hours, we will be able to recover without having to pay that ransomware payment in Bitcoins or whatever. So I think that's what we got to be looking at, is cyber resilience. And I do want to add one more word. I should have said this word earlier. And I remember when I was a lot younger, my first presentation was in Japan. There's a city in Japan called Tsukuba City. And in preparing for that presentation, I took 3 to 6 months of learning Japanese, hiragana, katakana, kanji, and all that. It's all Greek to me. I've forgotten everything. But there's one word of Japanese that I remember that is very applicable to this conversation that we're having today. And that word is Kaizen, Kaizen. You've heard of that before. It's continuous improvement. And when we think of cybersecurity and cyber defenses and the risk to business, I think that's what we got to be looking at, is Kaizen, continuously keep improving our cyber defense capabilities.